You work 60 hours a week, you show up early, you stay late, you say yes when others say no. You follow the rules. You sacrifice your time, your energy, your health for the job, for the team, for the promise of someday. You're loyal, you're honest. You take pride in doing things the right way, and yet, somehow, you're stuck. Watching someone else, someone who cuts corners, talks more than they work, knows the right people but lacks your skills, rise higher, faster, living the life you thought you'd earned. And you're left wondering, what did I do wrong? But maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe the real question is, what lie have I been told? From childhood, you were taught that hard work leads to reward, that effort equals outcome, that if you just grind long enough, the system will eventually notice, recognize, and repay you. But what if that formula is broken? Worse, what if it was never real to begin with? Nietzsche, the German philosopher who shattered illusions and exposed the hidden architecture of human belief, once wrote that moral labor, the kind of work glorified for its sacrifice, obedience, and humility, is not noble. It is a form of spiritual slavery, a psychological trap designed not to uplift you, but to keep you in place. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. In a world where power determines outcomes, morality is often used to control those who have none. You were taught to believe that virtue is its own reward, that if you just kept your head down and stayed good, life would eventually be fair. But life isn't fair. Life is competitive. Life is political. And the system you serve doesn't reward virtue. It rewards value. Not the value you create, but the value you control. That's why the nurse pulling a 12-hour shift gets paid less than the TikToker selling a get-rich-fast course. That's why a blue-collar worker who breaks their back every day will retire with barely enough, while someone who manipulates markets walks away with millions. It's not your fault that you believed the myth. In fact, the myth was designed for people like you, to keep you obedient, to keep you working, to keep you from asking dangerous questions like, who benefits from my loyalty? Who profits from my exhaustion? Why does the system praise hard work and reward something else entirely? Nietzsche didn't say you should stop working. He didn't glorify laziness or selfishness. What he challenged was the idea that obedient labor is inherently moral, that to suffer without reward is somehow sacred. That virtue means submission. He called this mindset slave morality, a belief system born not from strength, but from weakness, not from power, but from fear. And if you feel stuck despite doing everything right, you're not crazy, you're waking up. You're beginning to see that the world isn't malfunctioning. It's functioning exactly as it was built to. The people who rise aren't always the most skilled or the most selfless. They are the ones who understand power, how to navigate it, how to claim it, and how to detach their worth from whether or not the system approves. So ask yourself, what if working harder is not the answer? What if the belief in moral labor is not your salvation, but your cage? Because until you confront that lie, you'll keep grinding, while someone else rewrites the rules. Let's take a closer look at the contradiction hiding in plain sight. If hard work leads to success, then why do the hardest working people in society so often struggle just to survive? Think about it. The construction workers who rise before the sun and labor until their backs ache. The nurses who pull 12-hour shifts, racing between patients, skipping meals, missing holidays. The delivery drivers, janitors, bus operators, truckers, people who keep cities alive, who make the physical world function. And yet, these are the same people who live paycheck to paycheck, who worry about rent, who can't afford to get sick. Meanwhile, someone filming get-rich-quick tips in a rented Lamborghini on TikTok is making more in a day than that nurse earns in a month. You feel it. You've seen it. This isn't a rare glitch in the system. This is the system. Because while labor builds the world, labor does not control it. The people who earn the most, CEOs, hedge fund managers, politicians, thought leaders, they are not the ones sweating in the heat or grinding in the cold. They are not pushing physical limits or sacrificing their bodies. They operate in a different domain entirely, the domain of leverage, perception, control. They don't just work, they position, they influence, they own. Let's be brutally honest. We've built a world where value isn't rewarded based on effort, but based on power. A world where controlling capital, networks, and narratives pays far more than producing anything tangible. And that world is by design. It's tempting to think this is unfair, that there's been some kind of mistake. But again, this isn't a malfunction. This is how the game has been set up for centuries. Because physical labor, no matter how honest, can be replaced, automated, outsourced, devalued. But control over resources, over people, over ideas, is scalable. The nurse can only treat one patient at a time. The investor can move billions with a single click. And the system favors scale. And here's where the lie of moral labor becomes especially cruel. We've been conditioned to believe that suffering is noble, that endurance is honorable, that those who serve quietly, who sacrifice without complaint, are the moral backbone of society, and they are. But morality doesn't pay the bills, praise doesn't build wealth, and sacrifice doesn't automatically translate into influence. While the working class is told to keep your head down and be grateful, those at the top are trained in strategy, in law, in manipulation, in capital acquisition. They are taught not to serve, but to manage, not to endure, but to dominate. They learn the rules, and then learn how to rewrite them. So ask yourself, if moral labor is so righteous, so essential, why doesn't it come with power? Why are the most indispensable workers also the most disposable? Why does society preach the value of hard work, then funnel the rewards elsewhere? Nietzsche would say, it's because the moral system itself was crafted by the powerful, not to liberate the masses, but to pacify them. It teaches obedience, not sovereignty, self-sacrifice, not self-assertion. It glorifies submission, then punishes those who dare to question the hierarchy. That's why the lie persists, because it benefits those in charge, because it keeps people striving, hoping, and working for a reward that never comes, because the promise of someday is the most effective chain ever forged. So the question becomes clear: if hard work doesn't lead to power, then what does? And more importantly, are you willing to unlearn the lie you were raised to believe? To understand how this lie took hold, why the world continues to reward manipulation over merit, perception over perseverance, we have to go deeper. We have to look at the foundation of the values we've been taught to live by. And for that, we turn to Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche didn't see morality as a universal good. He saw it as a weapon, created, shaped, and deployed by those in power to serve their own ends. In his eyes, what we call morality isn't truth, it's strategy. He drew a sharp line between two competing moral systems, master morality and slave morality. Master morality is born from strength. It celebrates ambition, boldness, creativity, and the will to shape the world. It does not wait for permission. It does not ask to be recognized. It declares its own value. The one who holds master morality defines good by what enhances their power, their freedom, their capacity to build and command. Strength is not seen as a threat, it is a virtue. And virtue is whatever affirms life, power, and possibility. But slave morality, that's different. Slave morality is born from weakness. It emerges from those who cannot compete on the battlefield of power, so they redefine the rules. They claim that humility is superior to strength, that obedience is nobler than dominance, that suffering is a sign of moral purity. In this system, the qualities that once defined weakness are reframed as virtues. because it's the only way the powerless can find dignity in a world they cannot control. And here's the trap. Once this moral code spreads, it becomes sacred, untouchable. It's no longer seen as a strategy for survival, it's taught as absolute truth. This is how moral labor came to be praised. The idea that good people sacrifice, that honorable people serve, that virtue lies in doing your duty, expecting nothing in return. We romanticize the worker who never complains, who always says yes, who puts the needs of others before their own, without realizing that this narrative serves those who benefit from their silence. Nietzsche would tell you, you are not rewarded for your morality, you are pacified by it. You're praised for being dependable, promoted for being manageable, rewarded not to empower you, but to keep you from asking questions. The system throws you a title, a plaque, a raise just big enough to keep you hopeful, just small enough to keep you dependent. And all the while, the true currency, ownership, control, power remains out of reach. So why does this belief still hold so much power? Why do millions of people still cling to the promise that suffering equals virtue, that sacrifice will be seen, that obedience will be rewarded? Because the story is beautiful. Because it gives meaning to pain, because it allows people to endure unfairness without confronting it. Slave morality survives not because it is true, but because it is comforting. And comfort is a powerful sedative. But Nietzsche didn't write to comfort, he wrote to awaken, to force us to confront the terrifying freedom that comes when you stop waiting for justice and start creating your own terms. And so the real question begins to take shape. Not just why we were taught to suffer quietly, but who benefits when we do. But if this system is so rigged, so clearly designed to reward control over contribution, why do so many good people still believe in it? Why do millions of hard-working men and women continue to chase a promise that rarely delivers? The answer isn't just economic, it's psychological. It starts early, long before your first paycheck. From childhood, we're taught that the world is fair, that good things happen to good people, that justice will prevail. Stories, cartoons, school lessons, they all repeat the same comforting refrain. If you do what's right, you'll be rewarded. Be honest, be kind, be diligent, and in the end, life will make sense. But here's the problem. That belief has a name. Psychologists call it the just world fallacy, the idea that the world is inherently fair, that effort equals outcome, that what you give will always come back. It's a beautiful idea. It gives people hope. It helps us make sense of suffering. But it's not true. And clinging to it, especially in a system designed to reward power over principle, isn't just naive. It's dangerous. Because while you're working late, double-checking spreadsheets, fixing problems you didn't cause, someone else is learning how to play the board. While you're saying yes, being polite, taking on the extra shift, someone else is building alliances, studying leverage, understanding exactly how to make the system work for them. You believe you're being moral, they're being strategic, and in this world, strategy wins. That's why the engineer who keeps the servers running gets laid off, while the reputation advisor with political connections gets promoted. That's why the nurse loses her weekend bonus, but the hospital's PR budget doubles. You've been taught to trust the latter. They were taught how to skip steps. And here's where it gets cruel. The system doesn't just fail to reward hard work. It uses your belief in fairness to keep you locked in place. The longer you wait for your virtue to be noticed, the easier you are to control. Because people who believe in justice don't rebel. They don't demand more. They keep waiting for recognition, for fairness, for someday. But someday never comes. This isn't just about money, it's about mindset. About understanding that if you keep showing up with the wrong map, you'll never reach the right destination. The rules you were taught were designed to produce good workers, not powerful people. Because the people who taught them to you, they understood the game. They just needed someone else to keep playing it. So if the world isn't fair, if virtue doesn't lead to victory, then what does? How do you survive without becoming ruthless? How do you move forward without losing your soul? The answer isn't to abandon morality. It's to stop worshiping it, to stop treating sacrifice like a strategy, to realize that good intentions are not a plan, that in a world built on power, understanding power is part of being good. Because when you open your eyes to the truth, that fairness is not a guarantee but a story we've been sold to keep us quiet, then you can finally begin to write your own. Not a story of blind sacrifice but of conscious strength. Not obedience but ownership. Not waiting for the world to change, but learning how to change your place in it. So what do you do once you've seen the lie? Once you realize that waiting to be rewarded for your obedience is a dead end? You don't throw away your morals. You redefine what strength looks like. This is the mistake many make when they first wake up. They think the only alternative to being exploited is becoming heartless. But Nietzsche didn't preach cruelty. He wasn't telling you to abandon integrity. He was telling you to stop confusing submission with virtue. His solution wasn't to destroy morality, but to overcome the morality of weakness. To become someone who doesn't just follow rules, but writes new ones. Someone who doesn't need permission to live with purpose. In Nietzsche's words, that person is the Übermensch, the overman, not a tyrant, not a villain, but a fully realized individual, a creator of values, someone who walks away from systems that no longer serve them and builds something better in their place. The Übermensch doesn't sit quietly, hoping to be seen. He defines his own meaning. He doesn't wait to be promoted. He creates impact on his terms. He understands the system, but isn't enslaved by it. He knows when to play the game and when to change the board. He understands that power isn't evil, it's necessary. Not power over others, but power over yourself, your direction, your destiny. You've seen these people in real life. The entrepreneur who walked away from a stable job to build something bold. The investor who turned rejection into innovation. The builder who stopped asking for permission and started taking risks. Think about Elon Musk, fired from the company he helped create, dismissed by others as reckless, until he built an empire on vision, conviction, and the refusal to be ruled by fear. What separates these people isn't just talent or luck, it's mindset. They didn't wait for the system to validate them. They stopped asking, "When will they see my worth?" and started asking, "Why am I giving them that power in the first place?" That shift, from waiting to creating, from submitting to owning, that's the path Nietzsche pointed to. That's what it means to step out of the cage of moral labor. But here's the hard truth. Escaping that cage means letting go of something deeply comfortable, your attachment to being seen as good. It means being willing to disappoint people who benefit from your silence. It means being willing to stand alone for a time while you build a new foundation. That takes more than confidence. It takes courage. Because true strength isn't about domination, it's about authorship. About writing a life that aligns with your deepest values, not the values handed to you by a system designed to keep you docile. This isn't about becoming selfish, it's about becoming sovereign. So ask yourself, what would happen if you stopped waiting to be rewarded and started rewarding yourself with the life you actually want? What would it look like to stop asking for a seat at the table and start building your own? You don't have to become ruthless, but you do have to become responsible for your own power. Because once you realize the system won't save you, the only path forward is to stop being a servant of it and start becoming the author of something greater. So what does action look like after the awakening? After you've seen through the illusion of moral labor, after you've stopped waiting for fairness, after you've chosen not to abandon morality but to reclaim your power, what's next? It starts with understanding this: kindness is not weakness, but strategic kindness, that's strength. Too often people confuse being good with being passive. They think saying yes, avoiding conflict, and putting others first makes them virtuous. But Nietzsche would say, morality without consciousness is just obedience in disguise. The goal is not to become cold or manipulative, it's to become conscious, to learn how to move through the world with both a moral compass and a survival strategy. Strategic kindness means knowing when to help and when to walk away. It means reading people, not just trusting them. It means understanding context, when to speak, when to stay silent, when to strike. It means you don't say yes to everyone just to be liked. You say yes when it aligns with your goals, your truth, your strength. Because here's the thing, not every job deserves your loyalty. Not every leader deserves your trust. Not every opportunity deserves your time. You must become the kind of person who knows when to walk away. When a situation is no longer serving you and has the strength to leave. Leaving is not failure. Sometimes it's the beginning of freedom. This is where power comes in, not as something you take from others, but something you claim for yourself. Power to create, power to say no, power to build systems where you're not just earning, you're owning, where your energy doesn't just fuel someone else's machine, it fuels a mission that reflects your values. That might mean starting your own business, or building a secondary income stream, or learning how influence works, not to deceive, but to defend your vision. It might mean learning negotiation, setting boundaries, saying, I won't do this anymore, and meaning it. These are not betrayals of your morals. These are expressions of your maturity. Because the truth is, if you don't learn how to play the power game, you will always be a pawn in it. But if you do learn, you don't have to lose your soul in the process. The key is to use power as a tool, not a trophy. Let your ethics guide your direction, but let strategy carry your decisions. Nietzsche put it simply, power is not evil, it's the will to become more. More than a servant, more than a cog, more than just the good employee. It's the will to become the author of your own worth. And you can't do that if you treat morality as a cage. You have to treat it as a compass, one that points to your north, not someone else's approval. So no, don't throw away your principles. Don't become another cynical player chasing status for status's sake. But do learn how the game is played. Do understand leverage. Do recognize when you're being used and when you're being seen. Because the future doesn't belong to the obedient. It belongs to the clear, the conscious, the ones who merge principle with power, empathy with edge. Not the ones who wait for the world to change, but the ones who learn to change the terms of their own existence. If you grew up believing that hard work is enough, that if you just keep your head down, stay loyal, and do things the right way, life will reward you, then it's time to wake up. Not because hard work is worthless, but because hard work without power, without strategy, without ownership, will keep you stuck. The real man doesn't just labor. He sees the system for what it is. He studies it, understands it, and when the rules no longer serve him, he writes new ones. That's the difference between surviving and leading, between being a cog in someone else's machine and becoming the architect of your own future. So if you're tired of waiting, if you're done with the myth that sacrifice is enough, if you're ready to think deeper, act smarter, and live on your own terms, this is where it begins. Subscribe to discover the kind of philosophy that doesn't just explain the world, but gives you the tools to reshape your place in it. One idea at a time, one decision at a time, one step closer to the man you were meant to become.